as vice chair. All right. Good afternoon. Welcome to the meeting of the Cumberland Housing Authority. I've called to order. So first thing we'll do attendance. Kara Biddings. Connie Bingham.
Here.
Stacy Daigle.
Here.
Norm Mays.
Here.
Sally Pierce.
Here.
Bill Stiles. Bill Hanson here. Okay. So we'll start off with the director's report on the Village Green Apartments on Drown Road.
I'm going to pass to Matt.
Okay.
Because he's done all the research on that for me.
Well,
I'm coming kind of missing. I will add one thing, is the fence project that we said that we were going to start sometime this year, started this morning. So
Oh, fantastic.
replacing all the fence at senior housing.
What's
So
he doing?
just a little trivia.
Awesome. And then regarding the Village Green Apartments on Drown Road, I had the opportunity to speak with Sylvia, who's one of the lead tenants over at the property, and she feels that things are going quite well over there right now. They have changed the company that was providing their services for their heating and other mechanical services over there, which was mechanical services, but now they have a new team that's doing it for them, and they're quite happy with it. The heating issues and cooling issues that they've had in the past have been reconciled, and they have one unit that has been vacant for a little bit, and then they just had a gentleman passed at the start of the month, and so they have a second unit that will be available at the start of October. So they're close to full occupancy, but there are 2 units that are available right now. But she seems to think things are going well now, and they not have any issues with management. So that was a good report. That's
Great.
You know, you never know until you ask, but she seemed quite happy with it. So that's encouraging.
What are their income limits?
Oh gosh.
Because they have their tax credit financed, and they were.
Yeah.
I believe, and this is not very technical, but I believe that they look at income. I don't think that there's a cap necessarily, but I knew someone working there, someone's brother got a new job, got a raise, and so his rent goes up relative to his income, which is the way that's set up, which is,
So he's,
it's,
So
that
yeah,
makes.
yeah, they may then have a sliding scale similar to what we'll talk about shortly as well here. So if
Yep.
you fall within X amount of percentage of the median income, your rent could be X, and then if it was greater, then it would increase as you go up the scale. Would be my guess then.
And I think some of those restrictions are based on initial assessment. When you move in, you have to meet those probably 60% area median income guidelines.
Makes sense.
Some are 50%, but most are 60% area median income, the tax rate
yeah,
projects.
I know they had ceilings when it first opened, and they were tied to the tax credit financing requirements, and they were fairly low, as as I recall, but I haven't tracked it since.
Yeah, review of all the different properties that, been looking at. Many of those, if they are low, 60, as Norm said, are pretty much oftentimes the standard by which I found most prevalent
For tax credit.
for tax credit programs, yeah.
Great. Anything else to report on the Village Green?
No, sir. That's it.
Okay. We'll move on to the second item of business, which is discuss the means test for the new tenants. And I was really hoping that, that you would walk us through your recommendation.
Sure, I'd be happy to, Mr. Chairman.
That'd be great.
And what I ended up doing was trying to look at a couple of different areas based upon the board's discussion last month, to try to put a couple different items out there for your review and try to give you as much information as I could provide, so you could determine which direction you'd like to go in. First was looking at income requirements and what you would be thinking about there relating to the rental of units, because you do have a combination of some that are, or that historically have been set aside for lower income, and then others have been at market, but the larger litmus test are the other qualifying standards that the property has, with the residency requirement and the others that are there that kind of already limit it to a certain extent. But what I ended up trying to do is I reviewed a lot of different policies that were out there that other towns had used or cities had used, and through the power of the internet, because it's there and it's a useful tool, I guess, the latter way to say it. But looking at the area median income thresholds, or asset thresholds, also being the second half of that discussion. So a big part of looking at an incomes mean test is trying to find where providing housing that would ensure equitable access to housing or for housing resources, align them with the HUD guidelines, because those are national as well as localized guidelines that have been established based on area median incomes, and that's also been localized for us within the Portland MFA that we have, which is what most use as their standard for defining that. And then also try to define based on data-driven planning for what your future decisions may be. So what I found looking under income means was looking at eligibility thresholds. And that was first looking at renters needing to have an adjusted gross income that doesn't exceed a certain percentage of the AMI. And as part of your package, I provided what Maine Housing had for the Portland HMFA, and that showed the different percentages of what the adjusted income is going to be, and then also from that based on applicant household size. So looking at that, you have one-person household, so they show their income limits that they would have for that, two-person, three-person, four-person, and so on. And then, so looking at that, I thought what the board may want to consider is potentially two different tiers, and we talked about a moment ago. At 60%, you could look at for your lower or your controlled unit housing if you wanted to look at that, and then 80% if you wanted to perhaps expand the applicant pool more so. That could allow more folks to qualify for those units, but it's still below what the area median income is. And it just depends upon what the board's thoughts would be, depending on the unit size and designation and how you'd like to manage that. Also looking at that was considering what the affordability ratio, or what looking at the overall picture for what it costs to actually be in the unit. So you'd have the rent plus if there are utilities involved, water, sewer, electrical, cable, things along those lines that also come into that, and trying to look at that and trying to have as a goal, at least for that, not to exceed 50% of their gross monthly income. Oftentimes what they look at is 20 to 30%. Oftentimes is what they find as what folks is a goal for paying for your your housing cost. It's acutely a challenge today, just because I mean, it's nice to have that as a goal, but I think, quite frankly, the numbers and the market has determined that it's greater than that, probably in practice, that you find. But if you could have as a goal, especially with this being, with a goal of it being affordable, if you could keep that to 50% or less, that would be a good way to maintain at least stability within the marketplace and within your tenants, so they're not overburdened by their housing and the affordability costs of their housing. Also looking at income verification, that's pretty straightforward that you could look at, and looking at it as, again, looking at it at the beginning of tenancy, because you don't want them to have to keep on coming in and qualifying year in and year out. With a lot of the tenants that you do have, that's really not as much of a concern, say, as if you had someone who was 20 or 30 years old going in, and their income could, presumably be growing. But a lot of the tenants that we have are on stable, stable, less volatile incomes, I guess, year over year, depending upon, sometimes a person might have a required minimum distribution that they have for their, a retirement account that could push them over, but that might be, that's on a case-by-case basis. But that would show up in their, on their federal tax return under their adjusted gross income. So, but you could use that as one of your standards. You could also look at such things as pay stubs if they don't have that, or in addition to that, pay stubs, tax returns, or benefit statements. There are other folks who don't actually have to file tax returns, or they may have, they may be a retired railroad worker or something along those lines that they don't have as similar standards that they have to file for. And then the other thing to think about would be looking at a sliding scale model. So if you wanted to look at 60% to 80% or even to 100%, you could say, based on your income, at 60% your rent could be X. At 80% it could be X plus or at a different level, and at 100% at a third level. It's just based on what their, I guess it would be from their means, or have their rent basically based on according to their means is the easiest way to look at that. And you could establish those scales, and as long as you publicize them, there would be equity that would be there, so everybody could be well informed, and they would know, what their neighbor would presumably be paying if they were at 100%, 80%, or 60% of the AMI. The other question that was brought up was, and I know the board was interested in this, but this is the tougher of the two areas to look at, and this is on asset asset consideration, and that's the tough part, because but trying to put that into consideration where someone may have low income but high assets. So this is in effect trying to find a way to reconcile those two, where a person may have means but not on an annualized basis that sits out there. So part of the way to look at asset thresholds would be you could look at total net assets that the tenants could provide you a listing of, such as cash and bank account balances. If they had mutual funds, stocks, bonds, and other investment tools that they might have at their disposal. If they had real estate holdings, excluding their primary residence, many times they would be disposing of their primary residence in order to come into the location, because that would be changing as a result of this. If they had retirement accounts or trusts or other financial instruments that sit outside of what you would be reporting, outside of interest income or other incomes that they may be showing in their on their federal tax return. And then thinking about and these, when I was looking at asset thresholds or limits that you would like to consider, these are fairly randomly chosen, but just for discussion purposes at the board level, to see what you would think would be appropriate to set it at if you wanted to go down that road. So looking at a single person household of $50,000 or less in assets, 2 persons 75, and 3 or more persons 100,000. That obviously can change depending upon your location, quite frankly. Some communities have, it may be, and Cumberland may be one of them, you may find that people have more assets to their disposal than they may have in other parts of the state. So that's really more of a localized question if you did want to consider that, where someone may be more affluent here when it comes to, especially if they sold their house and they owned it and looking to move, but they were of their regular income was lower. Some things you may want to consider if you're thinking about exemptions to that. You could say, if they had retirement accounts, but they were over 62, you could say, well, we're not going to consider that. Or you could say, again, if they had sold their house, or if they have a nicer or more expensive vehicle, or maybe they sold their house and they bought a new car the same year because they needed it, you could look at that as an exemption and say, we're going to take this out of your asset because, like for instance, when my mother retired a number of years ago, but she bought a car the year that when she retired, and we sold it, with 12,000 miles on it. And so she didn't put the miles on it, but she needed to have a car. So that's just an example of that. And then if you had a house that had a temporary income loss, so they might have had a medical event that took place where they had a substantial outlay that year. As we all know, something like that can change a person's outlook dramatically over the course of 12 months with co-pays or other areas that might not be covered that could impact their income significantly from one year versus the next. So you could look at that and then perhaps they had to also take a larger distribution from an asset that they had, such as their investment account, to help offset that. That ends up becoming a taxable event for them and could have a 1-year blip on their income. So that's just something to look at from a hardship review, or to exempt that from it. The other thought is, for assets, the applicant would have to submit perhaps their recent bank statements, for example, investment account summaries that are fairly common. They could show that. Property ownership records, or if they or transfer tax forms if they had sold their house, things along those lines that you could use to define that or verify it. And then you could, if you wanted to, define that or review that on an annual basis, or you could just have that as a one-time qualifying event as the tenant decided that they wanted to move in. And so those are the two areas that I looked at to try to give the board for your consideration. If you wanted to, I also came up with an implementation plan. If the board wanted to, I tried to lay that out as far as the way to share that information and have everybody on the same page, especially prospective tenants and then existing tenants as well. But you could end up looking at that and draft a policy or an ordinance that you have for the operating guidelines for the housing authority. Obviously, you'd want to consult with the attorney to make sure that what guidelines were being established and also housing policy experts would also be good to consult to see if they're in concert with what other recommendations sit out there. You could have, for stakeholder engagement, you could look at hosting a conversation with our existing tenants just to get them up to speed, as well as sharing it with the waiting list. And you could do that through a simple, email newsletter or direct mailer to them to let them know what the standards would possibly be changing to, and perhaps host a conversation with them that we could host here if you wanted to do something. You could also look at doing it as a pilot program and select a few units to use it on, and not the entirety of the property, but pick out, start with 4 units and have them assigned, if you wanted to, at different levels of rental per month. And then you could also look at how that worked, and you can check and adjust after a year or two to see how was that successful. And then you could then make a decision, okay, it didn't go very well at all, so we can scrap that and maybe come up with another program or another thought, or expand it to more units if it was successful. And then, at that point, after you decided that, you could look, as you went over time, expand it slowly, not at 100%, but X amount of percent per year until you got to 100%. And that way, as you had vacancies come up, you could then roll that into the new units that would be available. And then you could just apply that means test to all new applicants. And then also looking at those against the area median income numbers each year. So you'd have to look at that annually to make an adjustment to your rentals as well as your qualifying standards too, as the economy may go up or down depending upon where the market is at. So that's pretty much what I have as far as the assets and, means and asset testing for board to consider. And then the other area, just looking at potential rentals. I guess probably I would say it'd be a good opportunity to take a look at the Portland HMFA that we had for the units that we're looking at, and get that discussion started there, because you can, if you look at that in particular, if you looked at the 1 and 2 bedroom units for your 60 and 80% AMI, which is about 2/3 down the page on the Portland HMFA, you'd be looking at $1,461 to $1,753 for dollars for at 60% of the area median income, and then $1,948 to $2,000. I think that's $338 at 80% of AMI. So those are both significantly greater than what currently is being charged. So as you can see, there's a significant difference between where these units are at and even where the marketplace is sitting. So the one takeaway from that is right now you're providing an extremely nice housing units at a very reasonable cost into the market. So but you may want to look at that. If you did want to roll them out, it'd be as you came across to new renters, and then think about more of a less aggressive approach on the renewals next year as well. But that would be somewhere between what the market's at and what the units are currently renting at, and then perhaps do maybe a little bit more of an aggressive expansion next year or increase next year than with this year not having an increase recommended. So I think that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Connie, you want to start first with some comments?
Just briefly, I have quite a few comments on means testing based on my former life as a CPA. But what I'd really like to hear from other people on the board is who do we think this housing is for? I have my opinion, and that influences somewhat how the means test could be conducted. We are not tied to any federal guidelines, as I understand it. And do we have an age restriction? Do we have a minimum age?
62.
62 is our minimum age?
55.
Yeah, it's 50. That's
55?
55. Yeah.
62.
Okay. So we're really looking at 1 and 2 people in most cases. You know, thinking back, I've always thought of, there's this phrase, workforce housing, and who exactly does that mean, and what income levels. Over time, that's changed as couples are more likely to have 2 incomes, 2 retirement benefits, et cetera, et cetera. So I have not really thought of it as low-income housing. I've thought of it as median-income housing. You know, the retired teacher and nurse, for instance, married to each other. But that's my view. It's not everybody's view, so I'd like to hear from.
I think that's a great idea, Connie. You want to start, Norm, and we'll work our way down the board?
Sure. Well, I guess in terms of who we're serving, I guess without really looking at the current residents and their income, I would think we're serving perhaps some of the 60% area median income households, but we may be serving up to 120% of the area median income. And I know that some of the new middle income is what they are considering, that housing. That is Falmouth doing some 120% median income housing,
As well as here, the new development over on Blackstrap Road has this. Let's see, there's 72 units going in there for single-family homes, 36 of which are at 120% of area median income. up to 140% if they can't find a person that qualifies at 120. And of course, that the price of that, changes at 140 versus 120. I think at 120 they're looking at about 485 now for what that 120% affordable unit cost is.
Mhm. Yeah, so I mean, it's sort of a wide range, but, I'm thinking if we do different tiers, we may want to start with looking at something in the middle, look at 80%, if we do go with a pilot program, so that we're not excluding too many residents. And if we're talking about a 80% area median income, the 72,000 for a one-person household, that may be reasonable for some of the residents we're trying to target with these changes. And I would like to make something a program that addresses the needs of our, middle income, I guess to start with, as I'm saying, without penalizing too many folks. And I would think that if we're too aggressive, then we're going to, it would be sort of penalizing those middle folks. But if we're too generous, then we would, in some ways, penalize the lower income folks as well, and potentially, because then there would be fewer of those units available when they do become open. So I guess if we're trying to, I don't think we're going to come up with perfection to start, but I think if we find some sort of middle ground to pilot and see, because we really don't know what income is, because we aren't doing any means testing right now, so it's sort of a black box.
Yep.
So I guess I would veer towards something more middle income rather than getting too aggressive with the lower income.
Thank you, Norm. Sally?
I think there's probably some people there that are living on strictly Social Security. So they would be very low income. And I think it would be good to tailor it to them also, because they don't have any other place around that they could rent. So I think taking care of that part of the residents would be important up there.
Thank you. Stacy?
I agree, Sally. I agree. I've met maybe 4 people who live there. I think this is important. First of all, you've put together something really terrific, and thank you. And I appreciate all the comments that everyone is making. I feel I'm on the list. So, and that was, I thought it was, you were 62 years old, you've been in town, I've been living here for 30 years, so I just, for reasons that aren't necessary to go into, last year, put myself on the list. I guess what I want to make sure of is that if anyone feels that there's a conflict of interest or any kind of uncomfortable feeling about this, I want to make sure that I don't want to, I truly feel that I want to make sure that this is the best thing for what the town needs, but I want my personal integrity to be intact. So if anyone has any concern whatsoever, please,
No concerns on my
I'll recuse
part.
myself, or
No, I have no problem.
sincerely.
As long as you're not asking for special favors.
There you go.
I know when I came on this
I-
board, Carla encouraged us to get on the list, and we didn't for a variety of reasons, but it was accepted that everyone is eligible. and-
Right, but this is a different scenario, and it should be. And I have talked to someone in the town government area, we were talking about the idea of perhaps, someone had mentioned to me that it might be a conflict of interest for someone to be on the list and also be on the housing authority. So I just wanted to bring it up and make sure that, let's think about it. I think it's worth thinking about because this is a different scenario from where it was before. And
Stacy, if I
it's-
can interrupt,
Sure, I'm sorry.
if make you feel comfortable, we can have all our discussions and then we'd have a vote at that time. If you want to recluse yourself from, you
apologize.
certainly could do that then.
My
If you-
timing was
you-
wrong. I
No, you're
apologize.
fine. I'm just saying that I would definitely want to hear your thoughts, and if you would feel better about reclusing yourself from the vote, that would be fine to do that at that time, but I think that the public wants to hear your thoughts as well, so please proceed.
I think that, I will say, we have a beautiful, beautiful properties. I'm amazed by how well we take care of the properties. New kitchens, we have these, when the power goes out, these people have a place to go. It's a beautiful, beautiful property, and the rents are beyond reasonable. So I think that this conversation is not only appropriate, it's necessary. And you folks have had have made comments that are all sensible and good for the town. We need to be able to, the town needs to be able to be able to break even on this, if not put some money away for new things that need to happen, for emergencies, for whatever, different heat pumps, for whatever it is that needs to happen. And so I do think that things need to change. On the other hand, we have no idea, I don't think, what the income levels of the people who are living there now are. And so Sally has a feeling for that. And I think your idea of a pilot program and talking to the residents is a good one. We don't know what to do unless we get more information and find out what we're doing now and who those people are who are living in there right now. So I'm just impressed. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good thoughts.
Connor, you want to add anything?
Well, I'll just add my comments along the lines of other people's comments in that I think it would be very interesting if the existing residents, if we could get their reaction without telling them they have to turn in their tax returns. But just, does this seem reasonable? Does this not? I know from my time in professional life that what you see can be very different from what the public impression that people give can be very different from the underlying reality. And I would like, I guess if I were the decider as to who we're targeting, it would be people who have lived here a long time, who have ties to the town, because we don't have the federal tax credits. We're one of the few moderate income housing programs that can do that. And I would target probably not the people who are eligible for Drown Road, but people who would not be eligible for Drown Road for income-related reasons, as long as Drown Road is indeed a safe and well-cared-for place, but who wouldn't be a long way from getting into Ocean View or into other private options. And just throwing something out, I might target 100% of AMI. Using 100% of instead of 80%, and it's a ceiling. It doesn't mean that somebody with less income isn't eligible. But using less than 100% sends a message that if you're moving in there, you're somewhat low income. And some people would prefer not to make that statement. So I'm just throwing out 100%. And I'll save my chats about means testing for later.
Great, thank you. So,
And well, one more thing, I think, to Stacy. If you only got on the list a year ago, it's gonna be a long, long
Oh,
time.
exactly, yes.
And circumstances will change. And I guess one of my goals with this, it would be nice if we could scrub the waiting list to get people to get off it who are never,
Never going to.
who are
wanna
never
live
going to
up
move
there.
in.
Right, right.
Because now with the long waiting list, I think it's discouraging to people who need to come.
No,
And I looked at that list, and they were former clients of mine, and I thought, I'm not really interested in subsidizing you. I won't give you their names, but it's almost like it's a lottery. It's a real benefit to get in there.
I have one comment. Has there been any consideration of increasing the age to 62? Because 55 people are still working.
Right.
They still have an income. Normally, they retire at 65.
Yep, present company included, Ms. Pierce.
Well, I'm almost 80 and I'm still working.
Yes.
I
I'll be
believe
57 next month.
we, the
so.
board, could have a motion to open the bylaws for review. Is that correct, Christina?
I
So
think-
we
I think you
certainly
would.
could look at that at a future agenda meeting if we wanted to. Yeah.
You might have an exception for disabled 55-year-olds.
Yeah, yeah,
But,
because they wouldn't normally be working.
and they normally have kids in college. I mean, they're not gonna.
It'd be a question of what the board's preference would be. So if you'd want to open the bylaws to make that change, then that's perfectly within the board's ability to revise that, to accommodate when it was originally created, with the intention at the time. But, 30 years, 40 years later, you can look at that and say, okay, this is where we need to be in the marketplace now. The other thought as well regarding future rents would be the ability, when you do have the market or the rates get closer to market, it would allow us the ability to increase the reserves for replacement and for needed repairs that'll take place in the future. Probably the next, outside of the kitchens, the next item that you'll be looking at are heating systems there as well. And then we've also been working, as you know, the council last month approved, it was our last meeting, and the council's last meeting in August approved the expansion of the solar field to do that. So that also, working with Chris on that and revision on to include all of those, the power usage there as well. That'll be a future discussion for the board to consider as well, as far as putting that into potentially having that as a provider for the electricity needs there. So that could, you could either discount it or you could find ways to try to have that be allocated within the market.
Can we ask our current residents what their utility bills are?
I think we have them all, don't we?
I think we have a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have a reserve review so you know what's coming up and what you will need in the future to cover that?
Yes, we do have that in place. We do have a plan in place, and it's a moving target.
Yeah,
So,
right.
And as I
But
discussed
then
before,
you
the
know
fences. Right.
that you're going to have to increase the rent to cover the reserves.
And it's something that you want to do, I would say, year over year or a month-to-month basis, even with your rentals, in anticipation of that, as we, different than if you owned a condominium and they give you and you get the beauty of an assessment. That
We haven't
has
had
taken
one
place. Yeah, so that's where, that's the difference between what our operation and their neighbor's operation. So, but it is something that we want to be mindful of, especially as, as Chris said, with the fence project going in now, and that's a good use of capital. And then in the future, we will look at, the heating plants are definitely on the radar as we speak now as well, probably is the next item to be considering.
Sally, just so you know that I've been always impressed with the town. It's had a good capital plan for our facilities. It's been forward-thinking. And the good news is that have not had a meeting where they've come to us with a really surprise expense that they didn't see coming. Usually when we've had issues, we've known well in advance, so that's a great piece of work, the town to have that capital plan put together. So when I look at what we're doing, what's the purpose of this group, this housing? What is its purpose? What is the target group that we're shooting for? I would resist a change that would impact existing residents,
Oh, yeah.
because I don't think that that's fair. That's not the intent. This is looking forward for me, not existing folks. Fiscal responsibility is something we got to be mindful of, because we should be building reserves. You know, there was a dream at one time when I was here many years ago that we were going to build enough reserves to build more units and to provide more housing. Wouldn't that be great? Well, that's never come to fruition. We've never been able to do that, but that would be wonderful. So, and the other challenge is going to be, how do we manage this? Okay, because we don't want to hire 3 more staff members to try to figure this out and have, you know, really challenging rubrics to go through to find the measure. So those are things that I'm thinking about. And then I also wonder, as we're looking at who is our target, do we put in something that is exclusive so that if, say, there was someone that was 120% of the means, they couldn't be part of it? You know, or do we go a sliding scale so that they would pay a higher rate for that? So again, and I think this has to be, at least in my opinion, something you look at when they initially moved in. I would not recommend anything other than that. And then regular increases would go from there. So those are some of the things that are my thoughts. And so target groups, to me, I always thought it was the person in the middle that, you know, didn't qualify for the lower cost opportunities and could not afford the private housing or the retirement communities. So that was the target I thought we were looking for this as the group. I thought the purpose was really trying to, and those folks who have been Cumberland residents. So, you know, I struggle with someone who's not a Cumberland resident and wants to be part of this, because I'd rather have the person who's been here for 30, 40 years be in this housing, because this was their town. They invested their blood, sweat, and tears, paid their taxes, what have you, for that. So those are the group that I'm interested in. So, you know, to me, it really goes back to, you know, you and your team, Matt, is what's a manageable way that we can look at this so that it doesn't create, you know, work, so that Christina's working nights and weekends and holidays to make this happen, because I don't want that. Something that's easy for us to look at, but also I like the idea of the means testing, whether it's 80 or 100% to start with, and then we look at adjusting it, but it would be for new residents only. Now, I know when I talked to my uncle, he was, Bill Stiles, wasn't really in favor of having too many of these limits, and I wonder if it may be a good idea, and again, he's not here to represent himself, so I don't want to speak for him, but do we consider that we allow some units to not be impacted by the means test, and then others that are, so we have a split set up? But again, my concern with that is now I've just made it harder for Christina to do the work, which is a challenge. Go ahead, Christina.
We don't really have enough units becoming available.
Connie,
to
you
have
stole the
different
words right out of
rules,
my mouth.
Different rules.
The turnover is so little that
Yeah.
I don't even know that a pilot program would really benefit you. It would be, I mean, it's been a while since we've had maybe more than 2 a year for turnover, but
Possibly, Mr. Chairman, would be to look at a sliding scale and just apply that as you do have turnover, especially if the rate is so low that unless the rate all of a sudden picked up dramatically, you could implement it fairly quick, fairly, I guess, subtly would be a nice way to slow play it, I guess. But if you did that as they came aboard, you could look at your sliding scale, 60, 80, 100, 120, and then you could establish your rents based on that. You know, you have 2 of the 4 already here with the work done on that at 60 and 80 with the Portland MFA as a number, and then you could just advance it off those metrics and just use the percentages to try to apply that.
I'm wishing Bob Vail were here, because he was much more closely involved with our ill-fated attempt to build workforce housing. But one of the criticisms of that project, which was tied to federal tax credit income limits, was that the income limits were so low that 2 teachers married to one teacher could maybe get in early in his or her career, but not later in his or her career. And two teachers married to each other, forget it. And we, one of the cultural changes, which I don't really know how to quantify into all of this, is the two-income couple. So I would tend to go towards having a ceiling that is somewhat on the higher end of the average rentals. Doesn't mean lower income people aren't eligible. You know, we don't have a floor.
Yeah.
Any other board thought or discussion about this? Connie?
Would you have some type of preference for the lower income, the lower end? If somebody is earning 120% of that, and somebody is earning 60%, my thought is the person earning 60% needs that housing more than the 120%.
I think that's true if that person is not eligible for Drown Road.
Right.
I think we don't really need to duplicate the Drown Road offerings.
Right. Do we know for sure what their income is at Drown Road?
I'll have to confirm that, Ms. Pierce.
Because
just
that
to
would help
make sure.
us figure what
Yep.
would be, make them eligible for a Drown Road. And then if somebody comes in with an income that would make them eligible for Drown Road, then we might suggest that they look at that.
I think I would agree with you that the town has more of an obligation to the lower income retiree than to the upper income
Right.
retiree.
Right.
So somehow between, and we don't control Drown Road, but
Right,
it
we-
is part of the
yeah.
mix.
Yeah.
I just add something here. I guess when we do pull from the wait list, we just take them in order. Is that correct? So we're not really digging down beyond that name to assess them for occupancy.
Right, that's the way it works now, is I call the first name, and if they don't want it, I go to the second name, and then once I find someone that's willing to take the unit, I stop.
So we'd actually have to do means testing for the waiting list.
And
Only when their turn comes up.
True,
I mean, it'd be lovely if we could mean test the
But-
whole waiting list, but I don't think
but that
that's.
way, they would know ahead of time that they're not going to be eligible, and they're not sitting on the waiting list waiting.
Right.
but, oh, go ahead. think-
I would say, whatever change we make, if it impacts the people on the waiting list, I could do a mailing, which would have two benefits. It would also confirm if they still want to be on the list, and then let them know if you've established some guidelines, that these are the new guidelines. Are you still interested?
Christina, can you help me with this? Right now, we haven't had any of our, we have various rates right now on our units, right? So we have one of our rates, units were to come up that was on the subsidized. Do you look at that, does that look at an income for that person when we have a subsidized unit?
Yes, so right now we offer 3 one-bedroom subsidized rates. So when a subsidized rate becomes available, I contact all of the one-bedroom tenants and ask if they might be eligible. So we do look at the low income as set by HUD. And whoever's eligible lets me know. If more than one person is eligible, we look at who's lived there longer. And then that subsidized rate goes to them. So they don't physically move, but the rate would be applied to them.
Okay, so that's only existing tenants, it wouldn't be someone new on the list.
So far, we've always found an existing tenant that is at the low income and eligible to take the subsidy.
But in theory, if you kept your process of going down the list, and then you said, okay, I have a subsidized unit, you did the means test, and let's say the means test for discussion purposes was 60%, and that person didn't meet that, you go to the next person on the list until you found someone that met the 60% means or whatever.
For the low income
For
rate.
low income ones. So we have a mechanism for looking at that right now, which doesn't change your process.
Right. I haven't had to use that mechanism, but you're right. That's what would happen.
So we have that, so then we literally could keep those units at I'm proposing 60%, but that's not an actual thing, but just for say, so those would be our catch-alls for the folks who really needed to have that benefit. And then we could choose units to be at you could choose some to be at 80, and then you could eventually have some that be at we could do it that way, similar to we have our 3 rates right now.
Right.
And that wouldn't change the structure too much, and as they came up, they would come up as that type of a rate structure, so you would.
Right. So I think the existing subsidized rate is still very well below what HUD might say it should be.
Well,
So-
that'd be a time to correct that, though, when you have the new rental come in, that's what would be
Exactly.
adjusted that time. And that may make it such that the person who's in an existing unit may not choose to take that, because they may actually inherently have an increase, as opposed to keeping their existing.
That could
Because
happen.
because
You're
if
right.
we were to readjust each time a unit comes open, it would go to the new rate. So just, again, this is all ideas, nothing set in stone, but just trying to keep it simple for you so that you're not trying to do a lot of different work, and it's gonna be challenging anyway, but we steer the process of working down through the list. That's been the same process, it's worked well. And then if we look at the 3 different rates we have and assign those to some sort of AMI norm, it does allow for someone who's at a higher level to have an opportunity to get a place should they come available. So it doesn't exclude people. I think it's very inclusive as far as a process. Then it also gives the ability to, when the new tenants come in, we adjust those rates. So fiscally, we can stay responsible to take care of the upcoming costs, which will continue to increase. So I think that works pretty well and does meet the needs of I think of all the different groups that may be interested in it. Hey, Connie?
I don't want to dominate this conversation.
Sorry.
Christina, the letter that you're talking about sending to the waiting list, I think is a great idea. Would it make sense to send it to our existing, any proposal to our existing tenants and see what their reaction is? And with a clear message that it doesn't impact them.
Yeah. I don't see any harm in it if it doesn't impact them. So I would want to be clear with them
Be
that,
clear.
yeah, that it wouldn't impact
It might
them.
impact friends.
Yeah.
that
So yeah,
who wanna
I
move
could
there.
kind of poll them and say, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
Um,
And really, the good of it is not, the benefit of it is, and the reason we're doing it is to help people who really need it move up faster. Not try to increase our revenue. I think that's what brought us to this.
Norm, did you have something you want to add?
I just wanted to determine if the will of the board is to set a ceiling, income ceiling for all the units, or if we're going to have a market rate unit that would be available to any income. So I guess, are we looking at 120% area median income ceiling
For all new units.
for all new units? Correct, yeah.
Interesting question.
And then we would have the other units adjusted to 100 or 80% area median income, whatever we decide that the subsidized and would be, or grandfathered, or whatever we're defining these as.
Any comments on the board? Stacy?
That's a good we have to have some sort of benchmark. I understand. The information that Matt and everyone has put together gives a lot of different ways of assessing whether someone has too many assets, whether it's income or assets, to be even looking at these apartments. It does sound like a lot of work for Christina, but there are some ways of assessing whether those people should be on the list, should be looking at that or not. Would all of these things complicate setting up one income level, or would they complement that? I don't know. Am I making sense?
Well, I think that setting an income level is a step, and then measuring income is a second step. And if you want to get into measuring assets, that's a whole nother world.
Right.
So step by step.
So looking at a 100% AMI for Portland, it's about $90,000, almost 91. So 120% of that is going to be north of $100,000, I believe.
Wow.
Okay, so just something to think about as a metric as we're looking at this. So,
Where does
and
the property, I should remember, where does the property tax? It's around,
$91,000.
$91,000,
Yeah.
yeah.
this is if I do my
And
math
that's
correctly on my
fairly
my
close
phone.
to
So
the median,
Yeah.
100%. Seems like a good kind of target range to me.
Hmm.
yeah,
You think 120% is?
it's $109,000 is what
yeah,
120% would be.
is too much of an income to look at for those? I mean, that's a pretty good income
Mhm.
that the person could probably rent a regular apartment
Mhm.
for that.
I'm not
and
sure.
Yeah.
There isn't a lot out there, I don't think, but,
That's on a one-person household though, too.
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
So it could even be, for a two-person household, you're looking at roughly 125,000
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
is what that median is at 120. It's about 104 if you're at 100%. So
I think that may be too much to look at for an income for the apartments. I mean, that's a decent income that someone can rent a regular apartment or not tie up one of these.
I don't think there's a lot out there, just having looked myself for anyone, so it's, but I agree. It's probably not medium, so.
Matt, do you happen to know what like the average rental cost is for
Yeah.
apartments in the Greater Portland area? The actual market rate, is it approaching $3,000 or $4,000 a month? It's got to be, isn't it?
for a two-bedroom, you're in the three plus category, $3,500 a month.
So
Maybe
but
about 24 for a one.
So but you say 4,000 just to make math simple, that's
Mhm.
48,000 a year. So that's, you're at 100,000, you're approaching the 50% of your income that you were talking about was concerning, so.
What he said.
um,
You'd be in that range pretty quick with total cost on a monthly basis, utilities and all.
So a cap of somewhere in that 100%, you'd be at a transition place where you could afford probably private rental.
Mhm.
I think much above that, you'd really be getting into a group of people that could very easily afford a private rental.
One possibility might be to try it at 100%. It has a nice, clean message that we want. You don't have to be poor to live here. You just can't be rich. I don't know. It has It has the appeal of simplicity to me.
Christina, you had a question?
And just for clarification, at the last meeting, I had the impression that most of you were in favor of only looking at income and not assets. So are what we talking about, is that just looking at the income? Okay.
I can put my CPA hat on anytime anybody wants
Good.
me to. But I can clear a room pretty easily when I start doing that.
Any other board comments?
I just wanted to weigh in on Stacy's concerns about being on the wait list. And typically, public housing authorities in the state of Maine, by statute, have to have 2 residents or 2 participants in their program. So I don't see where that would be an issue, but we're not subject to those statutes. But I think it's good to have that perspective on the board.
Thank you for the perspective.
Yes.
Any other further discussion? So I'm just going to throw out a proposal just for the board to consider. We were to look at our 3 rates that we have now. And we were to look at the subsidized at the 60%, then the middle tier at the 80, and the remaining units at the 100. That the process would be the same, that Christina would use the list, work down the list. So if a unit came up that was the full market, the 100% AMI, we would adjust the rate of that unit based off the current market rate. And I would recommend to the board that they allow the town manager and his staff to determine what that rate would be at some time for the new units. The board would still recommend rental increases for existing, but I think it'd be better if we would stay out of that because that's a moving target. I think it'd be better to have them do that. That would allow us to meet all the groups that we're talking about here. And I think it meets the target audience we're looking for. And it's not going to be something that'd be really onerous for Christina to look at. It would be a one-time when you are applying for the apartment, you would have that single test and you'd be measured against the AMI at that time, which also changes. So that's just my recommendation. I'm happy to have someone take in, comments or make changes, suggestions. It's just, I think that's one way we could start with this as a trial, and then we would maintain the same number of units we have that are subsidized, and then in our middle rate, which I forget which it is, Christina, I'm sorry, I don't have that to memory, I should. And then our full rate, what we call our standard units, we'd keep that count. And then I think the thing we would finally have to do is understand that we should review that on a regular basis to make sure fiscally we can meet our obligations. And we may have to make a change to that. And finally, I'd really like to recommend that this does not even impact any existing residents. It would be the go forward only.
Right.
So that's my recommendation as chair.
Well, I agree with everything you said. I would throw out one way of making the means test. I think the means test should be income only. One way of dealing with that is to request 3 years of tax returns, because you'll pick up, people can't really play games with 3 years of historical tax
Very good.
returns. Or they can, but it's a lot harder. But it's not that hard to game 1 year if you, especially if you know you're near the top of the waiting list. The asset test bothers me because, well, for a common example, you take a couple that has works for municipalities. They have pension income, or teachers. They have pension income. That pension income is not an asset. It does not show up on their balance sheet. Their spouse worked in private industry where there are almost no pensions anymore, but they probably have a 401k. And the 401k is an asset. And so you get a vast difference in the assets of those 2 families. But the 401k person, it'll roll into an IRA, they'll have to take RMDs. The income from the 2 retirement programs will often be quite similar.
I think that's a great upgrade, Connie.
What?
I think it's a great upgrade to have 3 years of, it's awesome.
I
Very-
agree.
Any other comments or thoughts? I mean, I think at this point in time, I think we gave some really good feedback to town manager and his team, and I think the next step would be to take that information and try to pull together kind of a straw man of what it might look like with more specifics in it.
Mr. Chairman, I think I've done that during the board's deliberations. You know, just looking at what we had on the HMFA, at 60% for a one-bedroom, you'd be looking at $1,461. At 80%, $1,948. And at 100%, $2,325 would be the rents go on the go forward as they turned over. So that kind of gives you at least a picture as to where, you know, it changes, but I think as long as, you know, we do the outreach to the existing tenants and make it clear that it's not gonna happen, that assuages any fears that would be there, and then also would provide fair information to prospective future tenants that this is where the property's going towards on the go forward.
I'm trying to think of a way to give the staff some discretion in hardship cases. And the trouble with that is discretion can set you up for a lawsuit.
Certainly can.
So you probably don't want the discretion.
That's fast. Thank you, Mr.
Check it
Manager.
out.
I guess the one question that I have, and this is, Christine, you can help me with this one, is this does complicate someone who transfers from one unit to the other. So I guess that's something we probably need to think about as to how we would make that work. Maybe you have an idea already, Christina?
Well, I
but-
was just gonna say, in the past, and we haven't had a lot of this happen while I've been here, but I know that if they change units, say they're in a one-bedroom and their name comes up on the two-bedroom, they kind of lose their status as existing tenant. They become the new tenant, and whatever
At the new price.
whatever that new rent is what they're gonna pay, not what someone else in that unit would have
Right.
paid 10 year, you know,
Right.
the 10
That
years
makes
they've been
sense,
there,
yeah.
so.
Yeah.
That's
I
an
mean,
easy way to apply it, that
I think the two bedrooms are pretty desirable. And,
they are very.
You have need maybe where somebody has a caretaker living in, but,
That certainly works. I was more thinking of the person who, a subsidized unit comes up and they're in a non-subsidized, but the new rate could be more than what they're
Right.
paying at
And
this.
in that case, they don't have to move, they
Right.
just get the new rate. And we don't subsidize any of the two-bedroom
Right.
units.
All right, well, I guess if we keep that as the process, is that if you were to, an opening came up in one of the different rental rates, you would pay whatever that rate would be if you chose to move, or you would stay and retain the rate that you have. And that would be the choice of the tenants. In some cases, it may cost more to go to a subsidized unit than your existing one-bedroom if you've been there for a long time. You may choose not to do that, but, okay. Any other discussion, Norm?
I just, would they have to income qualify at that point, though, if they were going to be transferring to a subsidized unit? Would you be,
subsidized unit, people would have to.
if they're going down to a subsidized unit, would they,
They would have
at
to
that
income
point, have to be means tested
Yeah.
again at that?
That's a great point. I would think that anytime you were to change a unit, you would
You'd
have to
still
go
be
through
means
the means test.
But you'd have to establish eligibility for the subsidized.
Which the means test would do for you, right?
Christina, if we're throwing out anything that you think makes your job impossible, will you say so?
I'll tell Matt later. No, no, I think what you all are describing is perfectly fine. Yeah. Manageable, yes.
Any other comments from the board or from the town? All right,
Thanks for all your thoughts on that. We appreciate the the hard work that you do on this. Well, it's not
So,
easy to jump it all
Yeah.
together.
I wonder if we don't draft something up and have a motion at a future meeting that would be specific to this? Would that make sense?
Yes, we can do that, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Should we have a future meeting?
I think we should set one before we leave, just so that we have it here.
Mm.
So, looking back at the new business agenda, I think we've had a good discussion on means test. We had two other items, rental rates for the new tenants. So that's gonna be part of your proposal.
Yeah.
So the third thing we had on here is discuss revise the waiting list. And I think it'd be helpful for me, Christina, if you would just briefly remind us all how you manage that.
So I believe what triggered this was, we had some longtime Cumberland residents that were on the list. And I can't speak to whether or not they've ever been offered a unit, but for whatever reason, they haven't moved into a unit. They've now moved out of town. And the way we've always handled that is, once you leave town, you're no longer a resident, you're no longer on that preferred list, which is the list I use first for current residents. So I believe there was some question about, because they've been on the list so long, should it matter that now they've moved out of town? So the way it's always been handled is, once you move out of Cumberland, you're not on the first tier of the list any longer.
That's right.
I think I brought this up last time. So I'll just say why. I was thinking because there is really no housing with medical support. And so we have good friends who moved out of a need to still live together and be able to be in a facility where there was a fair amount of medical support. Now, the wife has died, the husband is healthy, and might like to come back to Cumberland and would be an ideal candidate for a one-bedroom unit. Lived here for 40 or 50 years. That's the kind of situation I was thinking of, not the people who moved to Florida and are coming back to be closer to them. But I don't feel, if that just makes it all too hard, and back off that.
I guess my first thought is, it's certainly easier the way we're doing it now. But if you wanted to have some kind of longevity built in, like if you've been on the list for 15 years and never been offered a unit, then we'll keep you. That's my just off the cuff thought.
I think it makes it hard because in that case, yes, you would keep them on the list, maybe. There may be another instance where maybe you wouldn't want to keep them on the list. I think it's better, it's cleaner, that if they're not a Cumberland resident, then they're not preference for the rental. And then you're not going by a case-by-case basis.
I hear you.
Stacy?
I think I know the individual you're talking about, and I understand the situation, and it's certainly
Well, it's not.
serious.
it
I just wonder,
exists
I wonder if
because-
he would be able to pass the means testing on this on his own. That's all.
Maybe. I don't know, and I have not had this discussion
Yeah.
with the person. If Cumberland had an assisted living facility or any kind of, some of the options that exist at Ocean View and Falmouth would work for the couple in this situation. They just couldn't really afford Ocean View, so they moved to another community with another program. And for people our age who are married and both healthy, the fear of one person becoming disabled, Peter and I would have to move out of town. You know, our house couldn't be handicapped accessible. And I think this is not about Peter and me, but
Right.
it's a fear for people who may have worked here their whole lives. I don't
Nope.
know.
Norm, what do you have for a thought on this?
I mean, I don't want to introduce another classification, but, you know, that sort of would be looking at the first choice would be those that are living here, and then we're looking at another step, which would be, and I don't know how common this would be, that you would find people who have moved away and want to come back. It feels like it's a rarity, and I just wouldn't want to complicate it any more than it already is. So I guess I would choose to just keep the different choices the way they are right now. So
I don't know if I let you finish, Stacy. Did you have a thought on that?
I'm not sure that I do. I think it's complicated. I maybe because only because it adds a layer for Christina to have to deal with, but maybe that when that person comes back, that person would go to the end of the list, and if that was the case, as you said with me, would that person ever get to the top of the list? Anyway,
Well, the person
Oh,
who
it's true.
sold their Cumberland house and spent the money on health care is not going to be able to buy back into Cumberland in most cases.
It is a very complicated kind of thing to weave through, and
We don't have to.
yeah.
We don't have to do this now.
oh no, it's
I mean, I guess, there's a bunch of ways to look at that. I hate to have another list made for Cumberland residents who moved away but I don't know that Christine would ever get to that list if she went through the first list. Right, so,
that's all I meant. Yeah.
And, unfortunately, life, I think, always has some good choices and tough choices that we all have to go through, and it's, I don't know how we can find a system that works for all people all the time. It becomes very challenging to do that. So I guess I'm in favor of leaving it as it is, and you move out of town, that you would unfortunately come off the list, and I just can't think of a way that you have a metric that would make that work, as opposed to the person who continues to live in town and wait to get on that list. Because they're still here in town, paying taxes, being part of the community. And I understand it wasn't the person's choice who moved away because of the other reasons. It's unfortunate, and I'm sorry for that, but I just think it would be really hard for Christina to manage another layer on top of the rubric she has right now. Not that my opinion is the one that governs all. I just think it would be easier for her to just keep it as it is.
My opinion certainly doesn't govern all.
No.
So,
It's a very heart-wrenching.
We could have a motion and a vote if the board wishes on this, so that we could finalize it. Does that work?
Yes.
Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to keep the existing structure of residents, and I forget what the next step, the family of residents, and then folks that don't live here, keep that existing wait list in place.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Second? Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay, unanimous. Okay, do we have any public comment?
we have no public.
Okay. Before we adjourn, I would like to try to set a next meeting. And Mr. Manager, I'd like to, if you would weigh into what you think you need for time to draft something, and I'm sure there's going to be it needs some legal review, which will take some time as well. And it would, if you want to look at your calendar and let us know when it would work well. Mondays at 4 o'clock do work well for me to have this meeting. So that's a good time for me. I don't know if it is for the rest of the board, but,
It is.
okay.
Would the,
Mondays do not work for me.
Okay, not first Mondays, we can help.
not the first, okay.
Yeah.
Let's see.
And you
How-
probably prefer to avoid town council meeting
I
nights.
was gonna say, just so we don't get double parked, possibly the 20th of October?
That's good in my calendar.
Works for me.
So 4 o'clock on the 20th?
Sounds great. Thank you.
That'd be great.
Sounds good.
All right, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, great.